The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with tension. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the massive circular table, their various forms creating strange shadows under the blue-white lights. At the center of their debate was humanity, the newest and most controversial addition to their ancient alliance. Ambassador Vex of the Altari leaned forward, his silver skin gleaming as he spoke. The humans have been part of our council for only 6 months, and already they demand equal voting rights. They want trade agreements. They want military partnerships. He paused, letting his words sink in. They forget their place. Counselor. Thal, representing the insectoid creche, clicked his mandibles in agreement. Their world is nothing special. Earth scores only Class 7 on the habitability scale. Most of our home worlds are Class 3 or 4. These humans come from a soft, easy planet, yet they act like they belong among the great civilizations. The debate had been going on for hours. Some council members wanted to simply ignore humanity's requests. Others suggested giving them minor roles in galactic affairs. But Vex had a different idea, one that would solve their human problem permanently. Propose we give them exactly what they want, Vex said, his voice smooth and cold. They want to prove they belong among us? Let them prove it on Korath Prime. The hall fell silent. Even the translator devices seemed to pause before converting his words into the various alien languages. Korath Prime. Every species in the galaxy knew that name. It was a Class 15 Deathworld, the highest rating on the danger scale. 3 different alien expeditions had tried to establish colonies there over the past century. None had lasted more than a week. The Vrex had lost 200 colonists in 4 days. The proud Zephyrians had fled after just 2 days, leaving behind only automated distress beacons. Even the hardy silicon-based Rocklings had abandoned their attempt, after losing half their expedition to the planet's impossible conditions. You cannot be serious, whispered Elder Nira of the Peaceful Symphons. That world has killed thousands. The storms alone can strip flesh from bone. The gravity would crush most of our people. The very air is toxic. Vex smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his dark eyes. Exactly. The humans think they're tough because they survived some small wars on their little world. They think they deserve respect because they managed to reach space. Let them try their luck on a real challenge. Counselor Brix of the Aquatic Tidewalkers bubbled nervously. What if they actually succeed? What if they establish a colony? Impossible, Vex replied firmly. We've run the calculations. Even our best estimates give them less than a 2% chance of survival past the first week. The humans will either die quickly, or they'll flee home with their pride broken. Either way, they'll learn their proper place in the galaxy. The vote was closer than Vex had expected, but it passed. 7 species voted in favor, 4 against, with 1 abstention. The humans would be offered the opportunity to establish a colony on Korath Prime, presented as a chance to prove their worth to the galactic community. 3 weeks later, Captain Reed stood on the bridge of the colony ship Determination, reading the official mission briefing one more time. Around him, his crew worked quietly, preparing for what the Galactic Council had called humanity's greatest opportunity. Reed was a practical man in his 40s, with graying hair and steady hands. He'd served in Earth's merchant marine for 20 years before joining the colonial service. He'd seen dangerous planets before, but nothing like what the briefing described. Captain, called Navigator Hayes from her station. We're receiving the final data package from the Council. Environmental readings, atmospheric composition, surface maps, what they have of them anyway. Reed nodded. Display the basics on the main screen. The bridge's large display lit up with information that made several crew members take sharp breaths. Korath Prime was larger than Earth with nearly twice the gravity. The atmosphere was breathable but thick with industrial pollutants that would corrode most metals within days. Surface temperatures ranged from freezing to boiling depending on the weather, which changed without warning. The planet experienced acid rain, lightning storms that could last for weeks, and seismic activity that regularly reshaped the landscape. And the wildlife? Asked Dr. Stone, the expedition's chief scientist. She was a small woman with curious eyes who seemed more excited than worried about their destination. Hayes pulled up another data file. Hostile doesn't begin to cover it. Carnivorous plants that actively hunt prey, pack hunters the size of elephants, flying creatures with acidics, breath. And that's just what previous expeditions managed to catalog before. She didn't finish the sentence. Before they all died, completed Chief Engineer Mills dryly. Mills was a big man with calloused hands who'd spent years building settlements on frontier worlds. Well, at least we know what we're walking into. Reed studied the data for a long moment. Something bothered him about this whole mission, though he couldn't put his finger on it. The Galactic Council had been surprisingly generous with this opportunity, especially given how they'd treated humanity's other requests. They'd even provided a ship and basic supplies, though Reed noticed the equipment was all older models. Reliable, but not the latest technology. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Lang, "I'm picking up the Council observation ship on long-range sensors. They're maintaining distance but following our course." "Observation ship?" Reed frowned. That wasn't mentioned in the briefing. Dr. Stone looked up from her scientific instruments. Maybe they want to document humanity's first attempt at colonizing a Class 15 world, for historical records. Mills snorted. Or maybe they want to watch us fail. Did anyone else notice they gave us exactly enough supplies for 6 months? Not a year, not 2 years, 6 months, like they're expecting us to give up by then. Reed had noticed the same thing. The more he thought about it, the more this felt less like an opportunity and more like a test, or worse, a trap. But 500 human colonists were counting on him to get them safely to their new home, whatever the Council's real motives might be. "How long until we reach Korath Prime?" he asked. 18 hours, sir," Hayes replied. Reed looked around at his crew. Good. People who'd volunteered for this mission despite its obvious dangers. Behind them, through the ship's corridors, were 500 more humans who'd left Earth behind for a chance at a new life. Families with children, young couples looking for adventure, older folks seeking one last frontier, scientists eager to study an unexplored world, engineers ready to build something from nothing. They'd all read the briefings. They all knew the risks. And they'd all come anyway, because that's what humans did. When faced with the impossible, they didn't back down. They figured out how to make it work. "All right, people," Reed said, his voice calm and steady. "We've got 18 hours to finalize our landing preparations. Dr. Stone, I want detailed analysis of those environmental readings. Mills, double-check all our equipment and make sure we have backup plans for when things break down. Hayes, plot us the safest possible landing approach." As his crew got to work, Reed took one last look at the data about Korath Prime. Somewhere out there, an alien observation ship was following them, probably filled with Council members expecting to watch humanity's newest colony collapse within days. Reed smiled grimly. Maybe they would fail. Maybe Korath Prime would prove too much even for human stubbornness. But if the Council thought humans would give up without a fight, they were about to learn something new about the species they'd so casually dismissed. The determination flew on through space, carrying 500 humans toward what the galaxy considered certain death. In the observation ship following behind, Ambassador Vex watched their approach with satisfaction, already composing the report he'd send back to the Council about humanity's inevitable failure. Neither he nor Captain Reed could have predicted what would actually happen when humans met their first real Deathworld. The first thing that hit the humans was the smell. Even before the landing shuttles touched down on Korath Prime's surface, the filtered air systems couldn't completely block the harsh chemical stench that seeped through every seal. It was like breathing inside a battery factory mixed with rotting eggs and burning metal. Captain Reed gripped his safety harness as Shuttle Alpha bounced through the violent atmospheric entry. Around him, 25 colonists held on tight while the small craft shook like a toy in a hurricane. Through the tiny windows, flashes of green lightning lit up angry purple clouds that stretched to every horizon. "Landing zone coming up," called Pilot Martinez over the intercom, her voice strained with concentration. "It's going to be rough, people. This storm isn't giving us any breaks." Reed looked at the readouts on his wrist display. Outside temperature, 47 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric pressure, 2.3 times Earth normal. Wind speed, 85 kilometers per hour with gusts up to 120. And they were landing during what the previous survey teams had called mild weather. The shuttle slammed into the ground hard enough to rattle teeth. Through the cabin, Reed heard the hiss of the air recycling system working overtime to filter the toxic atmosphere outside. Emergency lights flickered as the shuttle's electronics struggled with the electromagnetic interference from the constant lightning. Hull integrity holding, Martinez reported. But I'm seeing corrosion warnings already. Whatever's in this air, it doesn't like our metal. Reed unstrapped himself and moved to the small window. What he saw outside made his stomach tighten. The landscape looked like a battlefield designed by nightmares. Black soil stretched in all directions, broken by twisted rock formations that glowed faintly with some kind of mineral phosphorescence. Strange trees, if they could be called trees, reached toward the storm clouds with branches that moved too much in the wind, like they were grasping for something. "Captain," came Dr. Stone's voice over the radio from Shuttle Beta. "You need to see this. Our landing scanners are picking up movement, big movement, and it's heading our way." Reed activated his personal scanner and swept it across the area. Outside their shuttle, the readings made him frown. Multiple heat signatures, each one larger than a grown human, were converging on their landing zone from 3 different directions. "All shuttles, this is Reed," he said into his communicator. "We have incoming contact. Everyone stays inside until we know what we're dealing with." But even as he spoke, something slammed into the side of Shuttle Alpha with enough force to tip it slightly. Through the reinforced window, Reed caught sight of what looked like a plant, but a plant with teeth and claws that scraped against the shuttle's hull, leaving deep scratches in the military-grade armor. "Jesus," whispered Martinez. "That thing's trying to eat our shuttle." Aboard the observation ship hovering safely in orbit, Ambassador Vex watched the human landing with satisfaction. Multiple screens showed feeds from automated surveillance drones that the Council had deployed around Korath Prime years ago. "The first shuttle has been grounded for 12 minutes, reported his aide, a young Altari named Kess. "Local predators have already located their position. Estimated time until first casualties, 6 to 8 minutes. Vex nodded approvingly. "Are the other shuttles experiencing similar difficulties?" "Yes, sir. Shuttle Beta is under attack by a pack of what they are. Database identifies as stalker vines, carnivorous plants that typically work together to bring down large prey. Shuttle Gamma has landed in what appears to be a nest of acid spitters." "Excellent," Vex said, settling back in his comfortable chair. "Begin recording everything. The other council members will want to see exactly how quickly these humans collapse when faced with real danger." On the screens, they could see several humans in environmental suits trying to exit their shuttles, only to be driven back by attacks from creatures that defied easy description. One appeared to be a cross between a crocodile and a giant centipede, with dozens of legs and a mouth full of rotating teeth. Another looked like a walking tree, except its branches ended in snapping mouths instead of leaves. "The humans are trapped in their landing craft," Kess observed. "Standard protocol for most species at this point would be to call for immediate evacuation." Vex smiled his cold smile. "Contact the human ship in orbit. Let's see how long it takes Captain Reed to admit defeat and beg for rescue." But Captain Reed wasn't thinking about rescue. He was thinking about lunch. "Dr. Stone," he said into his communicator, "what do we know about the digestive systems of these creatures attacking us?" "Excuse me?" came her puzzled reply from Shuttle Beta. "I'm looking at this plant thing trying to chew through our hull," Reed explained calmly, "and I'm wondering what it eats normally. Because if it's trying this hard to get to us, maybe we taste like something it already hunts." Dr. Stone was quiet for a moment. "That's actually brilliant, Captain. Give me a few minutes to run some scans." While she worked, Reed turned to the colonists in his shuttle. They were scared. He could see it in their faces. But they weren't panicking. Marines Beck and Torres had their weapons ready. Engineer Mills was studying the hull damage with professional interest. Even the families with children were staying calm, trusting their leaders to find a solution. "Okay, people," Reed said. Here's what we're going to do. These creatures are treating us like prey, which means they're probably not as smart as they are dangerous. Mills, what would happen if we vented some of our waste heat through the hull? Mills understood immediately. Make ourselves look less appetizing? Yeah, that could work. Give me 5 minutes. Me 5. Dr. Stone, Reed continued, can you identify what these things are actually hunting? What's their normal food source? Already on it, came her reply. Fascinating, Captain. These stalker vines appear to be ambush predators that normally hunt something called tunnel borers, large underground creatures that generate significant heat signatures. If we could somehow mimic the defensive mechanisms of these tunnel borers. You mean fight back, said Marine Beck, checking his weapon. I like that better than hiding. Reed made his decision. All shuttles, this is Reed. We're not waiting for rescue. We're going on the offensive, but we do this smart. Dr. Stone, I want you to identify weak points on these creatures. Mills, prepare defensive modifications to our shuttles. Beck, Torres, and all security personnel. You're with me. For first contact, Ambassador Vex nearly dropped his drink when the first human emerged from Shuttle Alpha. Captain Reed stepped out into the toxic atmosphere of Korath Prime, wearing a basic environmental suit and carrying what appeared to be a modified mining laser. Behind him came 2 more humans armed and moving with the kind of tactical precision that made Vex uncomfortable. What are they doing? Kess asked, staring at the screens. No species has ever voluntarily exited their craft during a predator assault on Korath Prime. The stalker vine that had been trying to eat Shuttle Alpha turned toward the humans with obvious interest. It was a massive thing, easily 3 meters tall, with a trunk like a twisted tree and branches that ended in tooth-filled mouths. It should have been able to kill 3 humans without effort. Instead, Reed calmly raised his mining laser and fired a sustained beam directly at what Dr. Stone had identified as the creature's primary nervous cluster. The stalker vine made a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe and collapsed. Effective, Reed said into his communicator, his voice perfectly steady. Dr. Stone, the neural cluster location was accurate. How many more of these things are we dealing with? Shuttle Beta is engaging 4 stalker vines, came her reply, and Vex could hear weapon fire in the background. Shuttle Gamma has 2 acid spitters, but Mills has found their digestive weak point. And Captain? Something interesting is happening. The local electromagnetic readings are actually decreasing now that we're fighting back. Reed nodded, then noticed something that made him smile grimly. Other creatures in the area, things that had been approaching to investigate the noise, had stopped moving toward the humans and were now backing away. They're pack hunters, he realized aloud. But they're not used to prey that fights back effectively. Torres, help me drag this carcass closer to the shuttles. I want the other predators to see exactly what happens when they mess with humans. In the observation ship, Ambassador Vex stared at the screens in growing disbelief. Not only were the humans not dying, they were actively hunting the creatures that had destroyed 3 previous alien expeditions, and they were doing it calmly, methodically, like it was just another day at work. Sir, Kess said quietly, perhaps we should inform the Council that the situation is developing differently than predicted. Vex said nothing. On the screens, he watched human engineers using parts from dead predators to reinforce their shuttle hulls against the acid rain. He watched human scientists collecting samples of everything they killed, already adapting to use local resources. He watched human families setting up temporary shelters in the wreckage of creatures that had terrorized this world for millennia. By the end of the first day, all 500 humans had successfully landed on Korath Prime. 0 casualties, 0 requests for evacuation. Instead, Captain Reed's final report of the day contained a single terrifying sentence. Landing phase complete. Beg. 3 weeks after landing, Engineer Mills stood in what used to be a nest of acid spitters and marveled at what they'd built. The former predator den had been transformed into humanity's first permanent structure on Korath Prime, a workshop that hummed with activity as colonists turned the planet's dangers into useful tools. Hand me that acid sack, Mills called to his assistant. a young woman named Parker who'd volunteered for the engineering corps. Carefully now. These things still pack a punch even after the creature's dead. Parker lifted the biocontainer with practiced ease. 3 weeks of working with alien biochemistry had taught all the humans to handle materials that would have terrified them back on Earth. The acid sac contained a chemical compound that, when properly processed, could dissolve almost any mineral they'd encountered on Korath Prime. Perfect for mining operations, Mills muttered, carefully connecting the sac to their improvised refinery. What took the Vrex months to dig, we can clear in hours. Outside the workshop, the sound of construction echoed across their growing settlement. Where the first day had been about survival, the following weeks had been about adaptation. The humans had discovered something that the previous alien expeditions had missed. Korath Prime wasn't just trying to kill them, it was trying to communicate. Doctor Stone emerged from the workshop's makeshift laboratory, holding a tablet displaying her latest findings. Her environmental suit was stained with various alien chemicals, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "Mills, you need to see this," she said, pulling up a complex diagram. "Remember how we thought the lightning storms were random? They're not. They follow patterns based on underground mineral deposits. The planet is essentially telling us where to find the richest mining sites." Mills looked at the data and whistled low. "So every time we see those green lightning clusters—" "Exactly. Concentrated rare earth deposits. The Zephyrians probably ran from storms that were actually pointing them toward the most valuable resources in the sector." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Reed, who walked in carrying what looked like a flowering branch. But as he got closer, both Mills and Dr. Stone could see that the flowers were actually small, tooth-lined mouths that snapped playfully at Reed's fingers. "Captain," Dr. Stone said carefully, "please tell me you didn't just domesticate a carnivorous plant." Reed grinned. "Meet our new security system. Turns out these snap blossoms only attack creatures that produce certain stress hormones. They're basically living alarm systems. Plant them around the perimeter, and they'll only bite intruders." Mills shook his head in amazement. 3 weeks ago, plants like that were trying to eat us." 3 weeks ago, we were stressed and afraid," Reed replied. "Now we're confident and settled. The local ecosystem is responding to our emotional state. It's like the planet can sense that we're not just visitors anymore, we're residents." This was the pattern that had emerged across their settlement. What the Galactic Council had classified as impossibly hostile was actually a complex ecosystem that responded to the behavior and attitude of new arrivals. Previous alien expeditions had approached Korath Prime with fear and desperation, triggering aggressive responses from the native life forms. But humans had approached it with curiosity and determination, and the planet had responded differently. Marine Beck jogged back into the settlement, returning from his morning patrol with a string of what looked like rainbow-colored fish slung over his shoulder. Except these fish had wings and could breathe fire when threatened. "Breakfast is served," he announced to the group of colonists gathered around the central cooking area. "Flame fishers, caught fresh from the thermal vents. Dr. Stone, you were right about the spice glands. They taste like nothing we've ever had on Earth." Beck had adapted to Korath Prime better than anyone expected. The former military man had discovered that the planet's dangerous wildlife responded well to confident, respectful hunting practices. Instead of trying to eliminate threats, he'd learned to work with the ecosystem's natural patterns. "Any trouble out there?" asked Torres, who was working on expanding their communications array. "Spotted a pack of tunnel crawlers about 2 kilometers east," Beck reported. "But they kept their distance. I think word is spreading among the local wildlife that humans aren't easy prey." This wasn't just Beck's imagination. Dr. Stone had documented behavioral changes in dozens of species around their settlement. Predators that had been aggressively territorial were now maintaining respectful distances. Scavengers were actually helping clean up areas around human structures. Even the notorious stalker vines had begun growing in patterns that seemed designed to provide natural windbreaks for the human buildings. "It's like the planet is adapting to us at the same time we're adapting to it," Dr. Stone had written in her daily reports. "Rather than seeing us as an invasive species, Korath Prime appears to be treating us as a new type of native life form. In the observation ship, Ambassador Vex paced back and forth in front of the monitoring screens, his silver skin flushed with frustration. The daily reports from the surveillance drones painted a picture that contradicted everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about Class 15 Deathworlds. "Show me the population count again," he demanded. Kess pulled up the latest data. 547 humans currently on the surface, sir. That's up from the original 500. Up? Vex stopped pacing. How is it up? Births, sir. 3 babies have been born since the colony was established and... Kess hesitated. And what? Requests for transfer, sir. Humans from other colonies are asking to be relocated to Korath Prime. They're calling it a paradise world in their communications. Vex stared at the screens showing the human settlement. What had started as a few defensive shelters was now a thriving town with permanent buildings, cultivated gardens, and even recreational areas. Children played in parks built around tamed carnivorous plants. Adults worked in harmony with creatures that had killed entire alien expeditions. Paradise world, he repeated numbly. They're calling a Class 15 Deathworld a paradise. Sir, Kess said quietly, perhaps we should consider the possibility that our classification system doesn't account for certain variables. Before Vex could respond, their communications officer rushed in. Ambassador, we're receiving a transmission from the human colony. It's addressed to the Galactic Council. Vex felt a chill run down his spine. Put it through. Captain Reed's face appeared on the main screen. He was standing in what appeared to be a comfortable office with windows that looked out over the human settlement. Behind him, alien plants grew in decorative pots, and the sound of human laughter could be heard from somewhere nearby. Greetings, Ambassador Vex, Reed said with a polite smile. I wanted to provide you with our 3-week status report. Vex found his voice. Captain Reed, I trust you're managing the challenges of your new environment? Reed's smile widened. Challenges? Ambassador, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Korath Prime isn't challenging us, it's welcoming us. We've established a permanent settlement, successfully integrated with the local ecosystem, and begun preliminary resource extraction. Operations? Resource extraction? Vex felt his stomach drop. The rare earth deposits here are incredibly rich, Reed continued cheerfully. We estimate that within 6 months, we'll be able to supply refined materials to the entire sector at competitive prices. We're also developing new technologies based on the planet's unique biochemistry. The potential for scientific advancement is extraordinary. Vex looked at the screens showing the human settlement. What he'd intended as a death sentence had become an economic opportunity. Captain, surely you've experienced some difficulties. Well, the learning curve was steep, Reed admitted, but that's true of any new environment. The key was approaching the situation with the right attitude. Instead of seeing Korath Prime as hostile, we've learned to see it as protective. The planet has incredibly sophisticated systems for identifying and eliminating threats to its ecosystem. But once we proved we weren't a threat, that we were actually beneficial, those same systems began working to help us. Beneficial? Vex could barely form the words. Absolutely. Our presence has actually stabilized several environmental systems that were in flux. The electromagnetic storms have decreased by 40% since we arrived. Mineral extraction activities have improved water table flow. And our agricultural experiments are producing food sources that native species are incorporating into their own diets. Reed paused as if considering his next words carefully. Ambassador, I wanted to thank the Council for this opportunity. Korath Prime is everything we hoped for in a new home. In fact, we've been contacted by several other human colonies requesting permission to establish similar settlements on other Class 15 worlds. The transmission ended, leaving Vex staring at a blank screen. In the silence that followed, he could hear the quiet hum of his ship's systems and the distant sound of Kess updating the colony status files. Sir, Kess said finally, what should we report to the Council? Vex looked at the monitoring screens one more time. Human children were playing in gardens filled with plants that could kill most alien species. Human adults were working alongside creatures that had been classified as apex predators. 6 months after landing, Dr. Stone stood at the edge of what had once been called the Dead Valley, a barren stretch of land where even Korath Prime's hardy predators had refused to venture. Now it bloomed with strange, beautiful plants that glowed softly in the perpetual twilight of the planet's storm-covered sky. "The transformation is remarkable," she said into her recording device, walking carefully between rows of cultivated alien flora. What we initially classified as dead soil was actually a complex mineral matrix waiting for the right catalyst. Human agricultural techniques combined with local biochemistry have created an entirely new ecosystem. Behind her, Farmer Liu tended to his crops with the same care he'd once used for wheat fields back on Earth. The plants he grew now would have been impossible to imagine 6 months ago. Hybrid organisms that combined human agricultural knowledge with Korath Prime's natural adaptability. "Dr. Stone," Liu called, holding up a fruit that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "The energy melons are ready for harvest. Mills wants to test them in the new power generators." Dr. Stone accepted the fruit, marveling at its warm weight. The energy melons were perhaps humanity's greatest breakthrough on Korath Prime. Living batteries that could store and release electrical power with 95% efficiency. A single fruit could power a human dwelling for a week. "Liu, how many of these did your fields produce this month?" "About 3,000, Liu replied casually. "And that's just from the test plots. Once we expand to the full valley, we're looking at maybe 50,000 per month." Dr. Stone smiled. 50,000 energy melons per month would be enough to power a city. Back on Earth, such technology would revolutionize civilization. Here on Korath Prime, it was just one of dozens of innovations the colonists had developed, by working with their environment instead of against it. In the settlement's expanded communication center, Torres was fielding the 5th request for immigration that day. The calls had been coming in steadily for months. Humans from colonies across the galaxy who wanted to relocate to what had become known as the Miracle World. "New Shanghai colony. This is Korath Prime," Torres said into her headset. "Yes, we're still accepting new residents, but I have to warn you about the application process. It's not as simple as just showing up." The voice on the other end was eager, almost desperate. "We understand there are challenges, but we've heard about the opportunities, the resource extraction, the new technologies, the quality of life improvements." Torres looked out the window at the thriving settlement. The original 500 colonists had grown to over 2,000 people, with more arriving every week. But not everyone who came to Korath Prime succeeded. The planet still demanded respect, adaptation, and the right attitude. "The biggest challenge isn't the environment," Torres explained patiently. "It's changing how you think about the environment. Korath Prime doesn't just test your survival skills, it tests your ability to become part of something larger than yourself." This was the lesson that had taken months for even the humans to fully understand. Korath Prime wasn't hostile to all life. It was protective of its own ecosystem. Species that tried to dominate or exploit the planet faced its wrath. But species that learned to contribute to the ecosystem's health and balance found themselves welcomed and supported. The failed alien expeditions had approached Korath Prime like conquerors. They'd brought weapons to fight the wildlife, machines to reshape the landscape, and shields to protect themselves from the environment. Every action had marked them as threats to be eliminated. Humans had initially made the same mistakes. But their natural adaptability had allowed them to recognize the pattern and change their approach. Instead of fighting the planet, they'd learned to dance with it. Captain Reed walked through the settlement's newest district where human architects worked alongside native crystal formations to create buildings that seemed to grow from the planet itself. The structures were more beautiful than anything he'd seen on Earth. Organic curves that channeled wind and rain into power systems, walls that filtered air and regulated temperature naturally, foundations that actually strengthened the ground they were built on. "Captain," called Engineer Mills from the construction site of their newest project, "you need to see this." Reed approached the foundation dig, where Mills and his team were working on what would become Korath Prime's first industrial complex. But instead of the usual concrete and steel construction, they were cultivating specialized organisms that would serve as living machinery. "We've successfully bred the processor colonies," Mills explained, pointing to what looked like a pool of shimmering metallic liquid. "These organisms can break down raw ore and separate rare minerals with 99.7% efficiency. No heat, no toxic waste, no energy consumption beyond basic feeding." Reed stared at the pool of living metal refiners. "How long until full production?" 2 weeks for the first line, maybe 6 weeks for full industrial capacity. "Captain, when this gets out, every mining operation in the galaxy is going to want this technology." But Reed was thinking about more than just mining. The implications of truly biological technology, organisms that could manufacture, process, and refine materials without the industrial pollution that plagued most civilized worlds, would change everything. Not just for humans, but for every species in the galaxy. "Mills, I want you to start documenting everything. Full technical specifications, breeding protocols, care and feeding requirements. Make sure we can teach this to others." Mills looked surprised. "Sir, this technology could give humanity a massive economic advantage. Why would we share it?" Reed looked out over their thriving settlement, where human children played alongside alien creatures in perfect harmony. "Because that's not what Korath Prime has taught us. This planet doesn't reward greed or competition. It rewards cooperation and balance. If we try to hoard these innovations, we'll be acting like the old alien expeditions that failed here." In the observation ship, Ambassador Vex read the latest intelligence reports with growing alarm. The humans on Korath Prime weren't just surviving. They were thriving in ways that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. Economic projections show that Korath Prime will be the most productive world in 3 sectors within a year, reported his aide. "Their resource extraction rates exceed anything we've seen, but with 0 environmental damage. Their agricultural yields are impossible by conventional standards, and their technological innovations—" "I can read," Vex snapped, but his anger was directed at himself as much as the situation. Every projection the Council had made about humanity's failure on Korath Prime had been wrong. "Sir, we've also detected unauthorized Council species attempting to establish their own settlements on Class 15 worlds. 2 Vrex expeditions, 1 Zephyrian research team, and a Kresh mining operation. All of them citing the human success model as justification." Vex felt his stomach clench. If other species started successfully colonizing Deathworlds using human techniques, the entire balance of galactic power would shift. The most valuable real estate in the galaxy, the resource-rich, worlds that everyone had written off as uninhabitable, would suddenly become the new centers of civilization. And the results of those expeditions? The Vrex lasted 3 days before evacuation. The Zephyrians made it a week, but lost half their team to environmental hazards. The Kresh. The aide paused. "The Kresh are still trying, sir, but their casualty rates are approaching 60%. Of course they were failing." Vex understood now what he'd missed before. The humans hadn't succeeded on Korath Prime because they were tougher or more advanced than other species. They'd succeeded because they'd approached the challenge with a fundamentally different mindset. "Sir," the aide continued quietly, "there's something else. We've been monitoring communications between human colonies. They're planning to establish settlements on 12 more Class 15 worlds within the next 2 years. 12 more worlds. If humans could replicate their Korath Prime success even half as well on other Death worlds, they would control the most resource-rich territories in the galaxy within a decade." "Contact the Council," Vex said finally. "Request an emergency session. We need to discuss revising our approach to humanity." As his aide hurried away, Vex looked one more time at the screens showing the human settlement. What had started as 500 desperate colonists had become a thriving city of over 2,000 people. Their buildings gleamed in harmony with the alien landscape. Their children grew up speaking both human languages and the chemical communication methods of native species. Their scientists had made breakthrough discoveries that would advance galactic knowledge by centuries. The punishment that was supposed to humble humanity had instead given them the keys to galactic dominance. Vex had the uncomfortable realization that the hunters had become the prey. The Galactic Council had thought they were setting a trap for humanity. Instead, they had trapped themselves. 1 year after landing on Korath Prime, Captain Reed stood in the Grand Council chamber of what had once been an impossible dream. A thriving human city built in harmony with one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds. The chamber itself was a marvel of bioengineering, its walls formed from living crystal that pulsed gently with stored energy from the planet's lightning storms. Around the circular table sat representatives from 12 different human colonies, all of them eager to learn the secrets of Korath Prime's success. But Reed's attention was focused on the large viewing screen that showed an incoming council ship, the first official visit from the Galactic Council since the colony's establishment. "Captain," said Dr. Stone, entering the chamber with a thick datapad in her hands. "The final numbers are ready for the council presentation." Reed accepted the pad and scrolled through the statistics that told the story of humanity's transformation from galactic newcomers to a major power. In 12 months, Korath Prime had gone from an empty Deathworld to the most economically productive planet in 3 sectors. Population, 5,847 humans, with immigration requests backlogged for 18 months. Resource production, 340% above galactic. Average for similar-sized colonies. Technological innovations, 67 major breakthroughs including biological manufacturing, living energy storage, and symbiotic construction methods. Environmental impact, net positive. The planet's ecosystem was healthier than it had been in centuries. Most importantly, Dr. Stone added, we've had 0 major accidents, 0 environmental disasters, and 0 conflicts with native species in the past 6 months. Korath Prime isn't just supporting human life, it's actively helping us thrive. Reed looked out the chamber's massive windows at the city beyond. Human children played in parks where carnivorous plants had learned to provide shade and protection. Human workers collaborated with alien organisms in factories that produced goods without pollution. Human artists created sculptures that incorporated living materials, creating artworks that grew and changed over time. "Any word from the other Deathworld colonies?" Reed asked. "All successful," Dr. Stone replied with obvious pride. "New Titan colony on Hellforge Prime is already extracting rare minerals using the biological processes we developed here. The Stormbreak settlement has found ways to harness planetary electrical systems for unlimited clean energy. And Deepwater Colony has established the first underwater human city, using symbiotic relationships with aquatic predators." Each success story represented the same pattern. Humans approaching impossible environments with curiosity instead of fear, adaptation instead of domination. Where other species saw death traps, humans saw opportunities for partnership. Ambassador Vex stepped off the council transport shuttle, feeling like a man walking to his own execution. The year since the human experiment began had been the most humiliating of his long career. What was supposed to be a simple lesson in humility had become a disaster for the established galactic order. The human settlement that greeted him was unlike anything in his experience. Instead of the typical colonial outposts, sterile domes and defensive barriers, he saw a city that seemed to have grown naturally from the planet itself. Buildings curved and flowed like living things. Gardens bloomed with impossible beauty. The very air hummed with energy that felt both alien and welcoming. "Ambassador Vex." Captain Reed approached with a warm smile and an extended hand, the human gesture of greeting that Vex had learned to expect. "Welcome to Korath Prime. I hope you'll find your stay enlightening." Vex accepted the handshake, noting that Reed's grip was firm but not aggressive. This was confidence, not hostility. "Captain Reed, I must admit your settlement is more extensive than our intelligence suggested." "Intelligence?" Reed laughed, a sound that Vex found oddly comforting despite himself. "Ambassador, we've been sending detailed reports to the Council every week for a year. Nothing here is secret. In fact, we've been hoping the Council would visit sooner. We have so much we'd like to share." As they walked through the settlement, Vex found himself constantly surprised. Children of multiple species played together. Not just human children, but young aliens whose families had requested permission to live in the human settlement. Markets sold goods that represented fusion of human innovation and alien biology. Artists from across the galaxy had come to study the new forms of living architecture. "This wasn't what we expected," Vex admitted. Reed nodded thoughtfully. "I imagine not. When you sent us here, you were thinking like conquerors. You assumed we'd try to dominate this world, and when that failed, we'd either die or flee. But humans don't think like conquerors, Ambassador. We think like partners." They stopped at an observation platform that overlooked the city's industrial district. Instead of the smokestacks and pollution that marked most galactic manufacturing centers, Vex saw gentle organic structures that seemed to breathe with the planet's natural rhythms. "How?" Vex asked simply. "We listened," Reed replied. "Every world, every ecosystem, every environment has its own needs and patterns. Instead of trying to impose our will, we learned to work within those patterns. Korath Prime didn't want to kill us. It wanted to test us. Once we proved we could be beneficial partners rather than destructive parasites, everything changed." In the Council Transport's communication center, Vex composed the most difficult report of his career. Around him, his staff worked quietly, all of them understanding the implications of what they'd witnessed. "The humans have not simply survived on Korath Prime," he dictated to his recording device. "They have transformed it into the most successful colony in recorded galactic history. More significantly, they have developed technologies and techniques that render our current understanding of planetary classification obsolete." He paused, looking out at the human city through the transport's windows. Even from orbit, he could see the gentle glow of energy systems, the organic flow of transportation networks, the integration of natural and constructed elements. The humans are currently planning to establish settlements on 47 additional Class 15 worlds within the next 5 years. Early reports from their existing Deathworld colonies suggest success rates approaching 100%. If these projections prove accurate, humanity will control the most resource-rich territories in the galaxy within a generation. The political implications were staggering. For millennia, the Galactic Council had been built on the assumption that Class 15 worlds were uninhabitable. Entire economic systems depended on the scarcity of resources that could only be safely extracted from less dangerous planets. If humans could successfully colonize and develop death worlds, they would control resources that dwarfed the combined wealth of all existing Council species. Furthermore, Vex continued, the humans have expressed willingness to share their techniques with other species. They have already begun accepting non-human residents in their settlements and have offered to provide training and support for other species attempting Deathworld colonization. This was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the entire situation. Instead of using their advantages to dominate other species, humans seemed genuinely interested in cooperation and mutual benefit. It was an approach to galactic politics that none of the Council species had anticipated. Captain Reed stood in the same landing zone where the first human shuttles had touched down 1 year earlier. The scorched earth and acid-scarred rocks had been replaced by a beautiful garden, where human children played alongside young creatures that would have terrified the original colonists. Beside him, Ambassador Vex prepared to board his transport, back to the Council chambers where he would deliver his report. The ambassador's silver skin had lost some of its metallic sheen, and his dark eyes held a thoughtful expression that hadn't been there when he arrived. "Captain," Vex said as his shuttle prepared for departure, "the Council will likely offer humanity a formal apology for this experiment. They may also offer relocation assistance to move your people to more suitable worlds." Reed smiled and shook his head. "Ambassador, with all due respect, we're exactly where we want to be. Korath Prime isn't our punishment, it's our home. And as for more suitable worlds," he gestured at the thriving settlement around them, "I can't imagine anywhere more suitable than this." Vex nodded slowly. "The Council also wanted me to ask about your expansion plans. There are concerns about humans claiming too many death worlds too quickly." "No claims necessary," Reed replied, easily. "Any species that wants to learn our methods is welcome to try. We'd be happy to provide guidance and support. The galaxy is big enough for all of us to find suitable homes." As Vex's shuttle lifted off, Reed remained in the garden, watching alien children chase butterfly-like creatures that glowed in the perpetual twilight. Around him, the city hummed with the quiet energy of successful partnership between human innovation and alien environment. The Galactic Council had thought they were teaching humanity a lesson about their place in the galactic hierarchy. Instead, they had accidentally given humans the tools to reshape that hierarchy entirely. But perhaps most importantly, they had discovered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability or their persistence or their technology. It was their ability to turn enemies into friends.